Hello friends, welcome to the channel. Bob here. Welcome to an Embers Adrift video. This video is going to be, it's probably going to be fairly long, so if you need something to listen to at work while you're bored, this might be the video, because it's going to be like, I'm going to talk a bit about launch and things surrounding that, kind of where the game is, where it's going, what it appears to be trying to do. We'll also look at, I'm also going to try and give you some new player tips, which I'll do at the start of the video, so you don't have to listen to any of the other stuff. I've seen quite a lot of people asking questions about the game, what sort of MMO is it, and then just kind of questions about mechanics in the game. How do you do this? How do you do that? That kind of stuff. So I'm going to try and cover as much of that as I can. The first part of the game you're going to see is kind of like the gameplay loop. It's the sort of things that you'll generally do in the game at the moment. Obviously, there's grouping up to go to camps and stuff for XP. There are a few quests. You've also got dungeons and stuff that you can go into. There's only a couple of those available really at the moment, and then there's like a couple of random ones I think that spawn. Yeah, so the video, I'm going to try and cover everything I can in the video regarding the game, including hopefully giving you some tips, new player tips on things that may help you along if you're thinking about buying into the game or you're uncertain. So I think first of all, let's talk about the launch. So the launch went very well, but with a big caveat, I think. So on launch day, there seems to have been several hundred people, from what I can tell. A friend of the channel mentioned to me they were playing during peak times on release day, and there seemed to be a lot of players around. I'm playing off peak, and off peak there are more than 100 players. I can't tell you how many there are because it kind of limits it to 100. But whenever I've logged in so far, there are more than 100 players. So the launch seems to have gone very, very well. And also from a point of view of just stability and issues at launch, there don't seem to have been any, from what I can tell. I mean, obviously it's a game that's got hundreds of players rather than, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or even thousands, so it's, but I still think that's quite a good achievement from an MMO point of view in 2022, because some of it, some of them have been an absolute mess, even companies that have got a lot more money, but obviously we're talking about a lot less people. The caveat, I think, is that you kind of have to, if you're unsure about the game, a few of you have asked me about population, what's the population like, and I think you have to kind of give it a little cooling off period, because at the moment a lot of people seem to be enjoying the game, as I did when I still do enjoy the game, but I've kind of come to understand its issues as I've gone along. So people are kind of in the honeymoon period at the moment from a game point of view, so you need to be aware of that really from a population standpoint. This is first month, so there's no subs being paid yet. So if you're kind of concerned about the population in general in any way, and if that makes up a big part of why you might want to get into Embers Adrift, I would probably give it a month or two to see what happens, because although a lot of people seem to be enjoying it, I've also seen a lot of people say that they're not sure they're really going to be paying subs when the subs happen. They just don't think there's enough content going on or there's enough to do, which is something that I do agree with. So I think you need to be careful at the moment. I think it's difficult, because at the moment it's $30, which is, still a lot of money in considering where we are with regards to cost of living and that kind of thing. So, it's a difficult one, because the cost will go up, obviously, the longer you leave it. I think after this month, from November, I think the game is going to go up to $40. But I still think that if you're unsure about a population thing, I think just hold fire just a month or two, just to let the dust settle and see where people are. Because as I said, I've seen a number of people say that they're really enjoying the game, but what that translates to when people have to start paying subs, particularly next year when the sub price goes up to $15, we don't know. So I would kind of hang in there if you're concerned about a population. But the game seems to have released really, really well. The second thing is, like, from a responsibility from my own point of view as someone who's a content creator, the game is still very much in beta testing. So if you buy into the game, you need to be aware of that. Some more zealous minority may tell you that that's just how MMOs are. They're all always in development, and they are, but that's not what this is at the moment. This situation is at the moment with Embers Adrift. Embers Adrift doesn't even have all of the systems in place that they're advertised as launch features. So as these things get added, obviously you're going to be testing them. I think they've got a Q&A server, but I don't know if they're going to be letting people use it to test stuff. But because of the population, it's not like you're going to be getting hundreds of people testing something on the Q&A before it goes live. So it's going to go on live, and we're going to be testing it essentially. And as I said, there are still features that were claimed as launch features that are not in the game yet. Zones, systems, mechanics, like a lot of the systems and mechanics and stuff were changing up until beta. So some of those haven't really been tested properly yet. So it's very much a game that is still in beta in the very sense of beta. So, and that's just something that you need to be aware of before you spend your money, really. And I think just from my own point of view, that's something that I need to make you aware of, because that's my responsibility. But aside from that, the launch appears to have gone very well. But if you're on the fence, I think it's very much a wait and see to see what happens when people start having to pay subs and that kind of thing. And I think that's probably covered the launch stuff. I guess we can move on to what I'll do in this section is I'll talk about what I do in this section is talk about the gameplay loop. I'm not going to talk much about the gameplay loop. I kind of want you to watch it. You kind of want you to watch what I've been doing since the video started, and you can decide whether it's for you or not. For me personally, I'm enjoying the loop. Some of the loop, some of it I hate, some of it I enjoy, which I think will probably be a common theme of the video. But I enjoy running around doing all the gathering stuff. I find the world immersive to be in. Lots of nice lighting, volumetrics, some strange colour effects, particularly at sunrise and sunset and whatnot. So that can be a bit off-putting, particularly at sunrise. It seems to be a bit weird. But overall, the game is very immersive. I know many of you on the videos that I've talked about have criticised the graphics, and I'm not saying it's state of the art, and I do agree when people say that it's kind of really got that bog standard Unity feel look to it, and again I can't disagree with that, but I do feel that developers have done a good job of making the zones feel immersive, and I think that's the most important thing. As I said, great lighting, great use of volumetrics. I like the layout of the zones. I think they're very well laid out when you're running around exploring. I think the problem with them is that they're just very bare, particularly the higher level zones. They're very large, and with regards to points of interest, as to like when you get to a point of interest and there's something interesting to do, there's not really a lot of that. And the zones kind of need fleshing out with regards to lore, like what's the lore of the zone, what's going on in the zone, who are the peoples, who were the peoples, what am I doing in it, what's the point. A lot of that stuff still needs fleshing out. But as I said before, it is a game that is very much still in beta, in my opinion. So that it kind of goes with the territory. I'm going to zone over into Meadowlands soon, which is one of my favourite zones. But this is part of the gameplay loop that you're seeing here, which I really, really enjoy. Kind of as a leftover from New World, really. Like my gathering, and to a lesser extent crafting is something that I really got into in MMOs. I really like it as a gameplay loop, and because I find the world immersive, I'm enjoying running around doing all of the gathering and stuff that I enjoyed in New World. I'd like to see, I guess, more of a loot table for the nodes that you harvest. I think the one thing that New World did that every MMO should do from now on that's got gathering in is give your nodes a loot table. Like for example, like the mining nodes do have a chance to drop a gem, but it's only like a chance of like one or two different a couple of different types. I'd like to see just the loot tables expanded, even if it's just stuff that you sell at a vendor for a few silver or whatever. I think it'll be really interesting. Different types of gems that you might get from doing your gathering at a metal node, for example, would be quite interesting. And it has that a little bit. I'd just like to see that expanded upon at some point, just for that dopamine hit when you're gathering and out and about in the world. But yes, the immersiveness of the world gets a big thumbs up, and I've really enjoyed running around in it and gathering and soaking up the atmosphere. I think there's going to be a sunset coming up. So to kind of end this part of the video, what I might do is just run in, because it's going to get quite dark, and what I might use is the dark part of the of the day to go over some newbie tips that might help you. But this is primarily what I'm doing in the game, running around harvesting and whatnot. You can get levers and skins as well. You have to kill animals to do that kind of thing. I'm just not doing that. Gathering has always become an obsession for me in MMOs. It's kind of what I do more than anything. There obviously, because I'm enjoying doing it, but unfortunately in Embers Adrift's case, there are some negatives as to why I'm doing it as well, and it's part of the reason why I'm only level 13. But I'll get into that in the correct part of the video, because I'm trying to keep things in order. But anyway, we will run through and I will show you Meadowlands, which is one of my favourite zones so far. I really enjoy the big open, like bowl type zone, and the lighting is really nice. The skyboxes are amazing, by the way. One of the big pluses visually. You know, I think they're really nice. Along with the lighting and the volumetrics. And some of you said to me that it really looks like Shroud of the Avatar, and like that was the first thing I thought of when I first logged into the game. It really does feel quite like that. But it's all these games are designed on Unity, aren't they? So, you know, and a lot of MMO developers don't have a huge amount of money to be investing in artists and animators and stuff. So, you know, a lot of it is kind of like kit box, you know, Lego kit box. You buy some stuff and you kind of put it together, so you get a very similar feel. But I do, from what I can tell, the developers are working on their own art and stuff, and they're always updating it and whatnot. So yeah, let's go through here, because I think we're about to get yeah, a little bit of a, what I can do, as we zone in here, I will then go through some hints and tips for you that might help you. Just trying to answer some questions that I've seen in the game from people asking questions, essentially. And I'll try and cover all of the basics, so when you come into the game, you've got an idea of how all the systems work. I think what we'll probably talk about first of all will be navigation, and how you navigate through the world, and what the game tells you, basically, in relation to how it's guiding you around the world. So first of all, there is a map. The map, you can't see where you are on the map, but it does show you some points of interest that you've unlocked. There is a fog of war on the map, and it isn't uncovered until you've visited the particular point that you need to visit to unlock it, basically. So that's how the map works. You can't see yourself on it, and there's no compass. It's a question I've seen a lot. Is there a compass in chat? There isn't a compass, but don't be alarmed, you know, asking those kind of questions. What you need to be aware of with this game, and any MMO, is that there's a minority of short-sighted veteran players who, anything that someone comes in and says that is kind of outside of the box, but it's not outside of the box. I'll explain that in a minute. Anyone that comes in and says anything that appears to be outside of the box of a classic MMO, they kind of get jumped on. I've seen it in the chat. It's the same people who go on Discord and Twitter who jump on people about asking for stuff that is not what they don't think is a classic experience, even though a sense heading compass type thing is very much a classic experience, because that's what EverQuest had. But you know, that's going to be a common theme of the video as well. People telling new players that this is not classic, but actually it is classic, and all of the MMOs, all the classic MMOs, had examples of the things that they're arguing against. But what you're going to do, that's what happens when you get a vocal minority of people who just want their game to be in their own little bubble, even if it means making stuff up. But anyway, there isn't a compass or a sense heading skill or anything like that, even though it was a classic thing. But what the game doesn't leave you high and dry. What it does have is a planet there. I think it's called the Eye of Ibex, because I did a quest that was talking about it. So I don't know if it's the planet that's called, or if it's one of these Jupiter-esque like circles or eyes on the planet that it refers to, but that's what it's called. And this is always north, basically. So face yourself towards the planet. It's always north. Open your map. Okay, I'm standing here because I know that's the zone in, and I'm looking north, essentially. And then, you know, by that and by landmarks around the map and that kind of thing, you'll be able to guide yourself pretty easily. I mean, to a certain extent, all of the zones are kind of like a bowl, really. And for many of them, you can go to the zone edge and just run around the edge of the zone because they're bowls. You know, that's how they've been designed. Big bowls, and some of them are bigger than others, but that's the basic gist of it. So, even though things like compasses and sense heading and that kind of thing is a classic thing, this game hasn't got those. But as I said, it does give you ways to allow you to navigate around the world. Perfectly fine. They're not too much of a problem at all. This is the basic UI, which I won't really go into too much. The only thing, apart from your ability bar down here that's got 8 abilities, you've got some quick slots. One thing that's worth pointing out is that these are the reagents for combat. So if you look at this here, crude salve, it says damage mod +5. If I tick that box, the box is very important because it means you can use your salves when you want. So tick that box, and here in my healing skill, 999 has appeared. So what these reagents do is give you a little buff. You don't need them, but it's nice to have because it gives you a little buff. And these come from animals as well that you kill in the world. And believe me, the main source of mobs are animals. You know, so you're going to be killing a lot of animals. So you should be able to stock up on these as you go along. Depending on what class you are, certain animals drop them. So, you know, just focus on those animals when you're killing mobs, essentially. But it gives you a little bonus. This must be a typo because it says damage mod +5. But this skill is only a healing skill. It doesn't do any damage. So maybe that's a typo. But that's how they work. And you can switch them on and off by using the arrow. I normally only use them if I'm in a group or if I'm fighting in content where I feel that I might need a bit more of a heal going on. So that's definitely something that's worth of note when you're playing game. Two other things I would point out on the UI when you're playing. One of them is that as you're fighting and when you die, you get a permanent loss to your health and stamina here, and you get a percentage number here. The way that you get rid of that is go and sit at an Ember ring. Now, an Ember ring is... The Ember stuff is kind of part of the lore, basically. So if you want to know more about that, I won't explain it at the moment. But if you want to go, what I'll do is, as I'm explaining things, I'll run down here because you get quite a nice view of Meadowlands. So Ember is part of the lore. The Ember ring is part of the lore. So go and check out on the website if you want to learn more about that kind of stuff. But the Ember ring also has like a mechanical function. So when you get these permanent losses, I say permanent, they are permanent until you sit at an Ember ring. So when you get these losses here, these percentage losses, you need to go and sit at an Ember ring to heal them. I don't like that mechanic. Again, it's not something that I ever remember seeing in Classic. I don't like a game that dictates my time, essentially, in the sense that it goes outside of the time barriers that you generally get in an MMO to anything, whether it's leveling or crafting or whatever it may be. I don't like the fact that the developer is telling me that I have to go and sit down. Now, I think part of the idea of this is to get people to take a break out from their camp, go and sit down, have a chat at the Ember ring and that kind of thing. But I can do that in my group anyway. You know, when I'm in a group in a dungeon in EverQuest, we don't think, oh, we better go out and sit outside and build a campfire so we can have a chat. We do that in the group. So I'm not buying that. You know, I don't believe that's what it's for. I believe it's just a time sink, personally. While it's something that might have sounded good on paper, you know, when you're kind of writing your design docket or putting ideas up on your whiteboard and you think this is a good idea, it kind of sounds like a good idea on paper, but I don't. Maybe it's just me. I'm sure I can't be the only one, but I don't like the game telling me when I need to go and sit down and take a break. You know, because it's not to chat, because I can chat in my group wherever we are. You know, we could be sitting in front of a dragon and we could be chatting. You don't need this break up in gameplay. I don't think this is a disturbance, a break up in gameplay, in my opinion, which I don't like. And I think the reasons for it don't make any sense when you actually think about it a bit more, because you can chat in your group and have a chinwag anywhere. You know, in EverQuest, you'd find a safe spot in a dungeon that you'd pull to. When the clerics and stuff needed to med up or whatever it would be, then you'd do that and you'd have a chat. You know, you didn't need to leave. EverQuest didn't force me to leave the game. Ultima Online didn't force me to leave. Asheron's Call didn't force me to leave whatever it was I was doing to go and sit at an Ember ring. But this is the Ember ring. You get a little symbol come up when you sit at it, and it removes these wounds for you. It also increases your regeneration rate when you sit at an Ember ring. So that's how that works. Other thing with a couple of other things with the UI as well is if you right click and select change portrait, you can change your portrait, which I think is a really nice touch. I'd quite like to see an upload thing, you know, like Baldur's Gate, where you could upload your own portraits. That would be quite fun. Yeah, in an MMO though, I'm not quite sure how they would manage that to stop people uploading stuff that maybe they shouldn't be uploading as a portrait. But yeah, I like that. That's how that works. Is really, really good. When you die, you leave your bag behind, which is here, the stuff in your bag. Now, I thought they'd changed this, but the other day I died, and I went to repair my stuff, and it wouldn't let me repair my stuff till I got my bag. I don't quite understand why, because your stuff, you keep your stuff you're wearing. You just lose the stuff in your bag. So I don't know if that was a bug or why it wouldn't allow me to do that. That doesn't make any sense, because if I die and appear with my stuff, well, I'm still carrying my stuff. Why can't I repair it? That's a bit odd. But when you do die, you lose your bag. You need to go and collect it. Kind of a bit like an EverQuest corpse recovery light, I guess, from a death penalty point of view. But what happens is on your corpse, on your little face here, little portrait, you get an arrow pointing towards your box, pointing towards your bag. So it kind of shows you where you need to go. So if you die and you want to get your bag back and you don't know where it is, there is a little marker on your portrait that will show you where to go. And I think that's probably covered most of it. One thing I did see some people asking about that they were a bit confused about was here, there's a shield. And so when it goes below 100%, I think you get a number here that starts ticking down. That's basically the condition of your armour. So if you look up here, my AC is currently at 100. So your armour has got like a durability. So as you get hit and stuff, your armour durability goes down, and your total armour class goes down. So you need to go and repair your armour basically and your weapons to get full functionality back. And while we're talking about that, we might as well move on to actual equipment and how some of the mechanics work there. So the game's got all of the stuff you would expect from an MMO with regards to items, magical items and whatnot. This necklace, for example, was made by a good friend of the channel. As you can see, it's got some stat modifiers, plus 10 health regen, blah 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 blah. I'm not quite sure what these numbers mean. It's certainly not plus 10 health. It must be plus 10% maybe, I'm guessing, because it's not health. But on the healing, plus 2 healing, I think it is actual healing numbers. So actually health numbers. But the plus 10 health regen, I think, is percentages. So I'm not quite sure about the numbers. I think that's something they need to make a bit more transparent as to exactly what the numbers are. Maybe it is plus 2% healing. I'm not sure. I probably need to test that by just healing with the necklace off and the necklace on. But as you can see, it's got all the usual stuff that you would expect from equipment. This is your Ember Stone, which is, at the moment, it's just a fast travel thing, helps you fast travel. You get the Ember Stone for a quest, which I'm going to be doing a guide for, and then you charge up the essence by fighting like ember mobs that spawn in a certain way. That's something I'll cover in the future as well. But essentially, this is your fast travel. The essence is your fast travel cost. There's like a 1 point or maybe 2 in some of the bigger zones where you can fast travel from, and it uses essence when you do that. Again, like a bit of a time sink. It doesn't have the transportation that EverQuest or Ultra Online had, for example. There's no run speed. Transportation is a problem, even for me as someone who still plays those classic MMOs. Your character just runs too slowly, essentially. There are these little butterflies you can pick up for like a 30-minute buff, and one of them gives you a 10% run speed. That should be the base run speed, because that is where you feel like, you know, you're not running along with lead in your boots. You know, it's just too slow. And obviously, like, they've given you a fast travel option, but you need to keep recharging this to use it. So again, fast travel is a time sink, much more than it was in classic MMOs. There are no characters that can cast run speed on you. There are no characters that can teleport you. There's none of that kind of stuff. Fast travel is basically your legs and your Emberstone, assuming it's charged up. Yeah, and that's one of the I was talking about before, about enjoying like the gameplay loop, like the gathering and stuff, and not enjoying it. And one of those issues is the travelling speed. You just run around far too slowly. And many of you have mentioned it to me when you've watched footage of the game. I think it's actually a real issue, and I think it's one of those things that could put people off. At the very least, have a couple of characters that can cast a run buff. I don't know why it's limited in this way. There was one character that had a run buff, but they removed it. I don't, it's, again, I'm not quite sure why. This is kind of like the theme of the game for me, where I was asking myself, like, what is a classic MMO? Because I'm not sure anymore. And this is not a classic MMO, just in my opinion. There are too many things that the community, like this kind of like zealot community, the minority, really, pointing out things that people are asking for and saying, well, this is old school MMO, it's classic. You haven't got that. You have to kind of blah 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 blah. But old school MMOs, EverQuest, Ultra Online, Asheron's Call, Dark Age of Camelot, even going into what I would call the second generation of MMOs like EverQuest, Vanguard, all that kind of stuff. They had these quality of life things. They had these conveniences, but for some reason, the developers and a hardcore base of players are fighting against it, saying, well, it's classic, that's why it hasn't got this stuff. But classic MMOs had this stuff, so it just feels like making up excuses for features that are not in the game, and they're saying that they're not classic when they are. And the other thing that you see as well is that people will say, well, this is not a WoW clone, blah 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 blah. But actually, this has more WoWisms that I've found as I'm playing it than it has EverQuestisms or Ultra Online-isms. There are a number of things here that I feel are a real issue, and they've got a real like WoW flavour to them rather than a more classic MMO feel, which was a lot more sandboxy. But that's something I'll talk about as we go along. So you've got fast travel, but it's quite limited. You've got this armor weight thing as well, which again is something that I'm really not too keen on at all. I don't know why this is here. Well, I know why it's here. Like, your armor weight is basically to manage your armor class per level, essentially, so it doesn't get too high, I guess, or whatever it is. But with the weapons have kind of like got an adventuring level limit that you need to be to use it, and I don't know why they didn't use just that for the armor as well. So the armor's got an adventuring level limit, and that's kind of as far as you need to go, I think, but you've also got this weight limit. So your character, for quite a number of levels, ends up looking like just some farmer who's sick of his wife nagging him. So he's gone out to the barn and he's made up some armour out of some tin sheets. He's found a stick in the back of the barn that he used to whack the cows with or whatever, and he's gone out adventuring because he's had enough. And I don't think people want their characters to look like that. I mean, I don't particularly like the WoW kind of like shoulder pads, like armour that glowing and turns you into like a demon type thing. But there's got to be a balance, and this is too far the other way, to a point where your character looks, I know it's low magic, but your character looks far too mundane, really, from an armour point of view. I wouldn't even call it realistic, to be honest with you. And I wouldn't call it classic. I wouldn't even call it D&D. I mean, I remember when I played D&D, if someone played a fighter, you could wear a set of full plate straight away because it was based on your strength. But this game doesn't have those stats, so maybe that's where the issue is. But I don't think you need armor weight. I mean, what you do is you limit it by level, but then you limit the armor class of the tiered metal for that level limit. So as a fighter or whatever it may be, whatever I want to wear, I can wear a full set of leather or a full set of copper, but the armour is balanced so that the AC doesn't get out of control in that way. That's the way it should be done. It should be the same as the weapons. I can't use a weapon to a certain adventuring level. You can't use certain tiers of materials in your armour to a certain level to wear, and that's how it should be. I don't understand this armour weight thing. It's something that I've never seen before in a game. Maybe it was NeverQuest 2 thing, I don't know. I think another theme that I'm finding here is that this game, people talk about classic and stuff like that, but I kind of wondering a lot of this stuff, like the chevron system for mobs, for example, has been taken from the second generation, which I don't consider classic, and I think most people wouldn't. Like, classic would have been the originators. EverQuest 2 in its title alone tells you that it's second generation. You know, Vanguard really was a game created by the EverQuest team after EverQuest, so it's like a second generation for them. So maybe there's some misunderstanding there as to what is classic and what isn't classic. But the armor weight thing is too limiting. It doesn't show your character's visual progression enough as you go along, and I just think it's an extra limit that is not required. Just balance the AC of copper, tin, leather, whatever it may be, so that you're getting the outcome you want from an AC point of view, from a design point of view. But the character still looks like he's ready for battle. He doesn't look like some podgy farmer who straps some metal plates to him. That's kind of not a great look. The game's got all lots of other stats which I won't go into. Fairly obvious, really. Healing, as I said before. All of these pluses come from equipment, mainly this one. And then you got some combat stats and some resistance stats which you can look at. Damage is done, I say slightly differently. It's kind of not really. It's still basically RNG based, but it's done on dice, or hit dice as they called it in Dungeons and Dragons. As you see here on the weapon, it says dice 4d2 plus 3. So essentially what that's asking you to do is, from an RNG point of view, is you roll 4 two-sided dice. I know it sounds weird. You essentially, for this weapon, you're essentially flipping 4 coins with 1 on one side and 2 on the other, and then you add 3 to the result. So basically, the base damage range for this weapon is what? It's like 7 minimum and 11 maximum. Basically, if I roll 4 ones plus 3, that's 7. 4 twos plus 3, that's 8. That's 11. That's how that's working. You've also got like to hit and penetration and damage bonuses. This staff's got to hit bonus if I'm fighting, if I'm in front of the mob. Some of them have got bonuses from the side or from behind. Just to give you a different example, this crossbow here is 1d5 plus 1. So you roll 5-sided dice and you add 1 to the roll. This has got a position bonus, plus 5 damage from the side and plus 15 to hit from the back. These are only base damages, but base damage numbers for the weapon. When you use an ability, you also add bonuses to that. You also add the abilities bonuses to that. So you're doing more damage overall, essentially. These are my crafting tools. As you can see, they're wearing away, so you do need to go back and repair. Yeah, every so often. As you can see, this person here called Semi-Rage has got this kind of like a shaded section here on their life, which means they've probably just died, so they're going to wear that away by sitting. I just want to point out, I don't actually mind sitting at an Ember Ring to get rid of a death penalty, but the game telling me when I should leave a dungeon or not, or go and rest at a camp is, you know, when I'm out hunting in a group or whatever it may be, is what I've got an issue with. And I think that's all we need to cover from the character point of view. Let's move on to the classes. So the classes, there are 3 base classes, and each base class has got 3 specializations, so 9 classes altogether. I'm playing a supporter, which is the healer buffer. Then you've got like tanks and DPS. It should be pointed out though that the other base classes and specializations also have some buffs and debuffs, so it's not just supporters that have it. I think they probably should have specialized that kind of stuff and more. They should have given tanks more tanking and DPS more DPS skills, and maybe had buffing and debuffing and supporting as just the supporter base class. But this stuff is spread around. I mean, the supporters are the best healers, so you know that's kind of where that role comes into its own. You need to get to level 6 before you can pick your specialization. I kind of, again, I'm 50-50. I kind of like it, I don't like it. It takes the bit I don't like about it is the fact that it takes too long to get to your specialization. So it takes till level 6 before you can choose what you want to be. And the thing is that when you use it, it's not as though you can test out the specializations when you're leveling your base role. So you've only got the same skills irrelevant of what you want to be. And you only really get a flavour for your specialisation when you actually reach it at level 6, which just takes too long, like personally I think. Yeah, and you can only really tell when you've been using your specialisation for a period of time. So I don't know what the cooling off period is at the start, or the getting into it bit is at the start. you know, because you don't really get an idea for your specialisation until you actually use the specialisation, and it takes too long to actually start to use the skills that are specific to your specialisation. So I don't like it in that sense. I do like it in another sense, but again, it's because of a limitation, and it's that you can change your base role. You can change your specialisation, sorry. So I can forget being a warlord if I want. I don't want to, so I'm not going to leave that up for too long. Because as you see here, there's a base level and a specialisation level. They level up together. But I can forget that and go back to level 6 as one of the other specialisations. You lose all the XP. You don't get it back if you go back to warlord. That would actually be a nice touch, wouldn't it? You know, you've put the work into warlord, so why should you use it completely? This also ties into the fact that you've only got a real limitation. You've only got 3 character slots. So if you want to try out all the healers, see what you like, you have to lose progression in one to get another one, because you're limited in how many characters you can choose. If you want to try DPS and a thingy roll, maybe they thought this was a good idea, but I don't think it works out, because it will work out if I could keep my specialisation in warlord and go back to it. But to lose all that progress and have to do it again, that doesn't sound like a good idea. Because if you want to try something, if I wanted to try something out, I'd rather just start a new character because of this. But you're limited because you've only got 3 slots. So yeah, a weird thing. But you can change it if you want to try one of the other specialisations. And I guess the only good thing about it is the fact that because your base is 13, you can still fight mobs around this level, but because you lose maybe a damage skill or 2, it might take you a bit longer to do that. So because you're fighting high level mobs, your specialisation skill will level up quicker, so it might catch up to your base. Well, it will catch up to your base skill quicker, I would say. That's the only good thing about it. But everything else just feels like a bit of a limitation, so I'm not a massive fan of it. But you can unlearn your specialisation and move to a different one if you want to, but only within the base role, essentially. You can't forget being a warlord, I don't think. No, forget specialisation. Yeah, you can't forget being a warlord, I don't think, and choose a different class, as far as I'm aware. So that's how that works, and you can change it if you want. You don't get a huge amount of skills to choose from. This game is making the cardinal sin that Pantheon is making as well, and it was a really big. I'm going to be comparing the combat to EverQuest, because that's the game it's closely mimicking from a classic point of view, just in my experience anyway. But you don't get many skills to choose from, and you get false upgrades. So I can't use first aid 1 ever again. When I get first aid 3, I can't use first aid 2 ever again. And that was a real tactic. That was really what gave EverQuest a lot of its tactical nuance. The fact that you could use lower level skills depending on the situation. That was a really, really, really big thing. The other thing that you can do in EverQuest as well is you can quick swap during combat. I think you can swap during combat, but you get a 30-second cooldown. So the game's also removing all of that tactical nuance from the EverQuest combat, which is closely this is mimicking closely, where, you know, if you were depending what class you were playing, you could quickly sit down and change a spell. If you needed a different spell for a different situation, you could do that. This game lets you swap, but you get a 30-second cooldown, so it's kind of a waste of time essentially in the context of the fight that you're actually in. And fights don't really last that long, you know. Although the combat is slow paced, they don't last long for you to worry about swapping a skill out and waiting 30 seconds. The fight will, unless it's a long boss fight, the fight will be over before then. Those two things are a real shame, because that is really what adds quite a lot of tactical nuance to EverQuest. And again, it's another limitation that feels quite wowish, you know, in that regard. Yeah, it's just a bit of a shame. I think that the game would really open up if you could use the lower level skills, and you could quick swap as well, depending on what the situation required. But the game has kind of removed those things, so it's generally a lot less tactical. Well, I guess we could cover some other skills now. So let's go on to crafting and gathering. So crafting and gathering, you get your first skill straight away, whatever you want it to be. There's three gathering skills and 6 crafting skills, so 9 altogether. Each character can learn 3, and there are 3 character slots available. That's quite convenient. I would say. You get your first one straight away. When you level up your first gathering or crafting skill to 6, you get a second one. Then you need to level both of those up to 12, and then you can pick a third one, basically. So you can have 3 altogether. This guy is my gatherer. He does all of the gathering, so I run around with him. He just gathers. That's all he does. There are 2 big limitations in the gathering crafting system. Not classic by any stretch. Very much a WoWism again. First of all, being limited by what you can learn. I think WoW was the first game that limited what crafting skills you could learn. They limited the amount. EverQuest you can still go and play on P99. You know, the classic experience. You can level all the crafting skills to 200. You can only take one of them to 225, which I think is the max, but you can still level all of them to 200. I'm kind of just trying to get involved in a little Ultima Online emulated server at the moment. I've gone and looked at some class kind of like building web. I've gone and looked at a class building website for Ultima Online Classic. Again, you can create a character that can pretty much do everything. So this is a real WoWism limitation. Also, there's also again, some of you might find it a bigger limitation, depending on what you want to do, is that your gathering or crafting skill needs to be within 10 levels of your adventuring skill. So if you really like crafting, and you want to be your guild's crafter, for example, you kind of can't do that, really. Well, you can, but you'll need to use all of your character slots. So you'll have 3 characters with 3 crafting or gathering skills on them. But then you would need to level, if you want to be the guild's crafter, or you just enjoy crafting and you'll get to the high level crafting, you will need to level those 3 characters to level 40, which is again a real limitation, a real shame. I don't know why it's in the game. Again, it feels very much like a WoW or a second generation MMO thing, like not a classic thing. I mean, when I was in a guild in Ultra Online, you know, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, we had people that just loved crafting and gathering, you know, and that's all they did, and they could do it. You know, there was no limitation. They could even build a character that could go out and defend itself and still gather stuff and that kind of thing. You know, we had people that just didn't like gathering or combat. You know, they just loved crafting, and the guild would feed them. You know, I'm the crafter. That's what I love doing. I'll do it all for you. Get me the stuff. I'll make you all the stuff. That's what they love doing, and they did it. You know, and this game limits that quite severely. I don't get it. You know, there's so many things I don't get from a classic point of view that are not classic, but that's how it's working in the game. You can forget your roles again if you want to. This is something that people ask quite a lot. You can forget them. Just right click and select forget. I don't want my finger to spasm and forget that. Yes, so you can do that. So if you want to get rid of one of these gathering or crafting skills and choose something else, you can forget it and then choose a different one. That's something that you can do, and yeah, I guess there's a little bit of freedom in that regard. And I think we've covered like most of the tips and stuff. We've covered getting around the world. We've looked at some UI stuff. We've looked at some character stuff. We've looked at some crafting stuff. I think what I'll probably do is do a little sum up kind of when the sun comes up, so you can see a bit. What I'll do is I'll find a little camp that I can hunt at and kill mobs at, so you can see the combat pacing and that kind of stuff. And I'll talk about my likes and dislikes, essentially. When you're in the world and you see one of these dudes pop up, these ember wraiths that just popped up there, don't get scared. They pop up every now and again, and they will disappear depending on how close you are to them. I'm assuming there's something to do with the lore that's not in the game yet, so you've got to wait for that, essentially. But anyway, I'll stop the video here because it's dark. I'll find a camp spot and I'll show you some combat, and I'll talk about the good and the own goals that I think the game has created for itself when I come back. Hello friends, welcome back to the video. So daytime has come. It's taken a long time, but I thought I would do like a summing up of the video, or summing up at the end of the video, essentially talking about various things in the game, positive, negatives. that kind of thing. You'll also see some combat as well, so you can see the pace of the combat, that kind of thing. I think we've covered like the environments and the world pretty well. I really like them. I think they're really immersive. I enjoy running around doing all of the gathering and killing mobs at camps, that kind of thing. That's very much a strong side of the game. I think some of the zones are unfinished and empty. They need more work, but that is definitely a strong side. The weak point there is the way the speed that you traverse the world. Even someone coming from classic MMOs, it's just too slow. You know, the zones are big, and your run speed is just too slow. A simple like 10% increase in run speed would have a massive impact on your enjoyment for your gameplay loop as you're running around the world. From a combat point of view, this is very much a mixed bag. I think from a solo point of view, the issue here are the classes. So I briefly spoke about the classes, but the problem is because, in case you hadn't noticed yet or you're unaware, the game is very low magic. So all the classes are essentially melee classes. You can use a ranged weapon, but there aren't any classes that feel like a ranger or like a proper ranged class, because my ranged weapon uses the same skills as what my melee weapon does. So there's nothing particularly different or flavourful in that regard. It's just the same skills, except you're using a ranged weapon. So all the classes are melee, and I guess the biggest criticism I can give to the game at the moment with regards to, certainly as a solo player, and I understand the game is group focused, but there will be times where people will solo and will need to solo, and I don't think that's a part of the game that should be ignored. But the biggest criticism I can give is that I run around this particular camp here a few times on the three different specializations: a support one, a DPS one, and a tank one. And the biggest criticism I can give is the fact that at points I forgot what class I was playing, because they're just too similar. You know, all the classes have some damage skills. All the classes have maybe like a buff or a debuff. When you're fighting solo, all you're really doing is managing your stamina. There isn't really anything else from a strategical point of view that you kind of need to be doing. And because there's no magic, I guess, you know, the classes just feel the same. As I said, the biggest thing I can say about running around as a soloer in the game is that I've played, as I said, DPS, healer and a tank, and they all just felt the same. They all look the same as well, because all the armors are the same. If you want to maximize your armor, you really kind of need to wear, if you want to maximize your armor class, you really need to wear a big chest piece, because that generally has the most stamina for the armor weight buck. You can go for a bit more flavor, but even then, you know, if you wear leather, all DPSs that you play or you see are going to look very similar. All the tanks you see and play are going to look and feel very similar, and this is essentially how it is for a solo player, whether you're playing tank, healer, or DPS, is that it just feels the same. Yeah, and as I said, there are times when I've been playing and I forgot what class I was playing or what specialization I was playing, because because everything's melee, generally they all just feel very similar, and that is a real issue with the combat. In a group, it's a bit more focused around classes. It's still nowhere near like EverQuest, for example, and I'm comparing it to EverQuest because the combat pacing feels the most like EverQuest. It is better in a group, and classes become more defined, and there is more strategy. And when you're in a dungeon, you do get that emergent gameplay of EverQuest, but it's nowhere near on the level of EverQuest. I think because of things I mentioned before about the classes, where you can't quick swap in combat, you can't use lower level skills, that kind of thing. So it takes away a lot of the tactical gameplay. But also the fact that the classes don't have a massive toolbox, really. Like, I know some people have said, like, the Warlord that I'm playing makes them feel a bit like a bard from EverQuest, but I have to say, nowhere near a bard in EverQuest. I mean, it's got a couple of like chants to regenerate things, but that's kind of where it stops. It doesn't have anywhere near the toolbox that but the bard has in EverQuest. One of the issues, and I'll show you one of the issues, is that classes obviously specializations don't feel distinctive enough from each other, just in my opinion, with regards to abilities and the way they look. But also, like, two of the key skills from my Warlord specialization is a battle chant and rejuvenating him. Now, if you take your hand and you just encircle the character on the screen so you can't see anything else, and then I use the abilities, you would have no idea that I'd use them. There's no animation of my guy chanting or singing or anything. There's no little note spells. There's nothing to denote that my character is using his class specific abilities. You know, there's nothing to differentiate the classes. You know, it's a real shame. As I said, like in group content, I know the game is group focused. No one has to tell me that. It does make a bit of a difference, but even so, you know, this game still has a long way to go before it gets anywhere near like the EverQuest kind of grouping that you would see in a dungeon with regards to the tactics that your classes give you because of the toolbox, or the emergent gameplay because of the dungeon design and the mob design, mob behaviours, all that kind of stuff. This game is severely lacking in those areas, and so you end up playing classes just feel the same. Some of the classes can even use the same weapons, so then it is really difficult to tell what you're playing. And I'm not sure how serious it was, but a couple of developers I've seen have actually said that this has come up before, and a couple of developers have said, well, the way that we did it was by the weapons strapped to the back, because some weapons are class and specialisation restricted. But that's no way to differentiate between classes. Players need more than that. I need to feel like I'm a warlord, and I don't. Like, even down to the animation, lack of animations for my warlord's key abilities. It doesn't have any. And please don't give me that horrible taunting ability animation that a lot of the abilities seem to have. That's horrible, that is. So there is a real issue with the combat, with how your character looks, particularly when you're soloing. Everything just feels far too samey, and it's difficult to differentiate between the classes. And because there's a lack of any real magic at all, you know, the combat just feels mundane because you're all using a melee weapon. With regards to the pacing of the combat, I love it. I think it's spot on. It's very much like an EverQuest feel to it. That's where it feels more like EverQuest the most. And when you're at a camp as well, I really like that. I think that's really, really good. It really feels like when you're at a camp and you're pulling mobs, you know, and you're resting, doing a little bit of resting in between, that really feels like EverQuest. It's got that pacing of combat. Unfortunately, again, there's another own goal, another development own goal, and that's over the course of a period leading up to release, they basically nerfed the experience. They said they changed the experience, but they've nerfed it to where leveling is horribly grindy. And I'm talking like as someone who's played EverQuest on P99 for about 10 years. It's even beyond that. You know, like it starts about level 8. I started to notice that I was having to kill 2 or 3 blues to get 1% tick of experience. That could be like 150, 200 mobs per level. I mean, you know, you're getting into like EverQuest hell level territory there at like level 8 or 9, until at level 13. Like I would say on average I'm having to kill roughly 2 mobs per percentage tick, 2 blue mobs that I should be killing per percentage tick. So the XP seems to have been nerfed to a point where it's painfully slow leveling. And I would go as far to say that this game is not suitable for a solo player. They say I mean, it's a group-centric game, but they do say that it is soloable and it is suitable for a solo player. But the reality is that it's not, because if that's primarily how you're going to be playing the game, God knows what it's going to be like in the 20s, 30s or whatever. You know, it's going to be a horrible experience. I'm assuming, I mean, it's better in a group, you know, even though weirdly, like myself and a friend were duoing the other day and we were finding the same results. We're having to kill 2 or 3 blues like to get a 1% tick of XP. So actually, I'm really not sure. Maybe if you're fighting the exact 2 chevron on level or 3 chevron on level mobs you need to be killing, maybe that makes a difference. But yeah, the leveling has been nerfed to a point where it's a horrible experience, particularly as a solo player. It's far too slow. I'm claiming shenanigans, you know, because the level content beyond level 30 is not really in the game yet. You can level past that, but I know a couple of people have done it and they said that literally it's like the worst gaming experience in the whole world ever. You would not want to do it. And so I'm calling shenanigans. I think that this has been purposely done so people don't reach high level, that people don't out level the content before they can get it in the game. It's a horrible experience, and as a solo player, I don't think it's suitable for you at this, unless they can do something with it. I don't think it's suitable for you at this period in time. I just think it's far too slow. And as I said, even as someone who's come from EverQuest and enjoys EverQuest leveling, pacing and stuff, and it is a lot worse than EverQuest, even at this level. You know, I know that some classes have got some classes had an experience penalty, but that's been taken away now. Some races still have it, but I know that on my shaman leveling in his 40s as an ogre that has a bit of an experience penalty, you're still getting around a percentage per mob, give or take. So this is much slower than that. As I said, you're getting into EverQuest hell levels every level from about level 8 or 9, and the leveling experience is not very nice at all, unfortunately, as a solo player. So as a solo player, I kind of can't recommend the game at all at the moment until it's something that maybe they look at and balance a bit better. But the combat pacing I do like. I know many of you have watched my videos and said that it's just too slow. But I enjoy it. This is what I enjoy about the game from a combat point of view. But it's severely held back by its character definitions, its character development, and how you feel that you're playing the type of specialisation that you're playing. And the leveling experience is horrible. It's just far too slow. As I said, if you played EverQuest Classic, particularly on P99 recently, you're talking like almost hell level type stuff, pretty much from level 8 or 9. It's not good. Crafting again is another one of those real love it and hate it type stuff. I'm enjoying running around doing the gathering. I'm enjoying the crafting even as someone who's not a big crafter. Yeah, it's grindy, but you kind of expect that. But the real issue with the limitations, there are a couple of areas where the game really feels like WoW, and it's adopted WoWisms, and the crafting is definitely that. Far too limited. You're limited in how many skills you can pick. You're limited by the fact that you need to level your character. Your adventure level needs to stay within a certain range of your crafting or gathering level. So you're limited on all aspects. If you just want to be a crafter, and that's what you enjoy doing, again, I think you're going to struggle in this game. Unless you've got a guild that's willing to power level you around and supply you with all the materials, or you want to play 3 orcs and level them all up to level 40 if you want to do all the high level crafting and gathering, then again, I think you might struggle in this game. It's a real shame, because it's a real shame overall, the game, because there are some really smart design decisions, I think, but then it seems to have taken all of the worst points of the worst MMOs and incorporated them as well. And the reason they seem to be incorporating these is they're saying that, well, it's a classic MMO, it's a classic experience, but it's not. A lot of these things are WoWisms. They come from WoW. Classic games didn't have these. And with regards to player interaction and the economy from a crafting and gathering point of view, if you've watched my channel for any length of time, you know that I've played a lot of MMOs, a lot of indie MMOs. I've played about half a dozen that I haven't even done content for, that you know nothing about, that I've played. And I'll pretty much say all of them allow a character to do all the stuff from a gathering and crafting point of view, and all of them have economies that work, and all of them have lots of player interaction. Some of them even have, I guess, what you would call like a bazaar or an auction house type thing. And the economy all still works perfectly well. You want people to interact and use a trade channel. I can understand that. These WoW-esque limitations as to what your character can do from a gathering and crafting point of view is a massive own goal, personally, I think. And and it's a real issue. It'd be a real issue for someone who wants to come in and they just enjoy crafting and gathering, because of the limitations. But the crafting and gathering is fun. I've really enjoyed it. So again, it's a real mixed bag. On the one side, I think all the things I'm talking about, I think, are probably all comes down to the same thing. It's that the absolute base level, the activities are fun to do, but there are mechanics and systems in place that essentially ruin all of that fun, basically. When you actually get to that point where you start banging your head up against these restrictions that are very much a WoW thing. I didn't mention inventory space and bank space and that kind of stuff before, but again, it's not classic. It's very, very much a WoWism. You have to pay for bank space. You have to pay for your own storage space. EverQuest didn't do that. Ultra Online didn't do that. Asheron's Call didn't do that. Again, was it an EverQuest 2 thing? It was definitely a WoW thing. WoW was the first game that I remember limiting you from a crafting and gathering point of view, and also asking you to pay for your storage space. Again, classic MMO, very vocal minority of players keep banging on about that. Seem to conveniently be forgetting that a lot of the stuff in this game is WoWisms. They're very much based on a classic World of Warcraft design level. You can't increase your gathering or inventory space bag. You're stuck with what you've got. You've got crafters where crafting bigger inventory and gathering space would be ideal for them, but they can't make you, or I can't make myself, a bigger bag or more bags to carry stuff in. You're very limited in that regard, which I think is again something else that really limits it. So I think, to sum up, I think that's kind of how I feel about the game. I feel that at a very basic level the systems kind of work, but then there are all these blocks in place that that kind of take away from your enjoyment, almost as though it's purposely done for a roadblock or a time-based thing or whatever it may be. It doesn't really make any sense. Like, the world's big and open, and I can understand that the first time you run through the world, you're looking around thinking, oh, it's great. And it is great. But after a short period of time, you get to a point where I'd like to get from A and B as quickly as I can for my camp or my group or whatever it may be. And so the run speed detracts from your enjoyment of your exploration of the world. Same with combat again. Like, I enjoy the pace of the combat, and I think a lot of you like classic MMOs will like the pace of the combat. But it's spoiled by the pace of leveling is just too slow, and the fact that your characters have got no real defining features other than the weapon that's stuck to their back, which isn't a good. It's not a good way of differentiating between classes, because people play classes because they like the class. I mean, don't get me wrong, the classes do have abilities, but it's just too limiting. It's just too limiting, and the classes don't feel different from one another enough. So often it just feels like you're playing the same character. We've covered the lack of quick swapping skills in combat, and the fact that you're stuck using the same one healing skill because it's upgraded. We've covered that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's how I feel about the game at the moment. To sum up, I feel that all of the good design decisions have been ruined by bad design decisions, which only seem to have been put there to limit you and increase the amount of time you need to do stuff. And a lot of these mechanics and features are being claimed to be classic, but they're not. These, and I've pointed out that they're not. I can prove they're not. Play P99, go and play Ultra Online on an emulated server. Play Asheron's Call on an emulated server. They're not classic features. They come from a different generation of MMOs, primarily around the WoW era. And I don't know what can be done about it. There seem to be some easy wins, really. Give everyone a 10% run speed buff, so you traversing the world is not too slow. Look at the XP curve, because it's just ridiculous at the moment. It really is. For this level, when you're leveling, it should, considering there are 50 levels and I'm level 13, but the pain starts from about level 8 or 9. You need to look at that. Look at your craft. Look at how you've set up your crafting and your gathering. Just include some stuff that differentiates the classes from each other, because they just feel too similar. There are some easy wins here, but whether they'll do them, because of the fact that a lot of the other content is not in the game yet, or because they've got this unclassic feeling of what classic is or whatever, I don't know, but that's just how it feels to me. I feel that it's a game that has got kind of some good roots to a lot of the mechanics, from combat to crafting and exploring, whatever it may be. But then they just score these massive own goals with regards to the tools they're giving you to enjoy those mechanics, if you understand what I mean. It's all too restrictive, actually. And that's the one thing that I don't understand. Everything is too restrictive, when the beauty of EverQuest, the beauty of Ultra Online, and the beauty of these classic MMOs was the fact that they didn't restrict you in a way that this game is doing. And I do feel that it's a real shame. But there you go. You know, overall, I'm enjoying what I'm enjoying. But the problem is, from a long-term point of view, I'm not sure I'm going to be playing it, because, you know, it's difficult. It's a bit like New World. So I would liken this game to New World in the sense that there are parts about New World that I really, really like, but there are parts that are clearly designed for a certain way of playing a game that is just either not very popular or just not very fun. And so I only log into New World now and again, you know. And with this game, obviously, because it's got a subscription, then I would stop paying my subscriptions, because, you know, because for me to just log in now and again when I feel like it, it's not financially viable if you're paying a subscription. Whereas obviously on New World, I'm not paying a subscription. But yeah, it's a shame. You know, I hope they look at some of these things just from a point of view of go and play some of these emulators that are available to us, so you can see how classic MMOs did these things. Don't try and remember something from 20 years ago that you're not sure about. Actually go and play these games so you can see what they were like. But anyway, there you go. Maybe ultimately they're not really trying to be like those games. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. Anyway, thanks for watching. It's been a long one, this one, but I know that you like long videos to listen to at work, or some of you do anyway. So anyway, thanks for watching and listening, and I'll speak to you again soon.